One of the most important papers in the philosophy of trust is Annette Baier's Trust and Antitrust. Published in 1986, it's become pretty much the cornerstone for the modern literature. Now, this is catnip to Trust Me, I'm a Philosopher, where we explore what trust is, why it matters, and how to build it. Baier's paper is really important for a lot of reasons. To start with, Baier is, I think, the first person to offer a really sustained discussion of the connection between trust, on the one hand, and reliance on the other, showing how the two are related but really importantly different. Baier points out that trusting, for instance, can be betrayed or at least let down and not just disappointed. She gives this great example of Kant's neighbours who she imagines as depending on his regular habits as a clock for their own regular actions. And she notes that those neighbours might be disappointed if Kant slept in one day, but not let down and not betrayed. And this, Baier thinks, shows a really crucial distinction. In this imagined case, Kant's neighbours clearly relied on him, but they didn't trust him. And they didn't trust him because just if Kant happened to sleep in and walk past their window at the wrong sort of time, he wouldn't be betraying them. He'd simply not be doing what they were expecting. As Baier notes, when I trust someone else, it really feels like I depend upon their goodwill towards me. And I know I can depend on your goodwill to like this video and subscribe to the channel. But beyond teasing apart trust and reliance, Baier is also the first to offer a really clear focus on what we might think of as the structure of trust. We often speak of trusting individuals, but in a lot of cases that's actually standing in for a bit more of a nuanced claim. There will be an answer not just to the question of whom do you trust, but also to the question, what do you trust them to do? What is it that you're expecting to take from this instance of trust? And that's a really, really important distinction. So for instance, imagine you confide in a close friend about a deeply personal matter. Maybe that's a mental health struggle or a past mistake that few people know about. When you do this, you're not just trusting that friend in general, you're trusting them with something really specific. That might be your reputation, your emotional vulnerability, or your sense of safety in the relationship. Now, this introduces a sense of vulnerability. They now have the power to hurt you. They could share your story with others, judge you, or subtly treat you differently. Now, Baier's point, and what we've just seen in the example, is that trust at least sometimes has this kind of structure. We trust someone with something that matters. It's not necessarily enough just to say, oh, I trust her or I trust them. We must ask ourselves, with what? What is it this person now has the power to protect or violate? In the case we discussed, that's the integrity of your personal life, your self-respect, and so on. But this question, what do you trust them to do, is crucial for understanding the moral depth and the risk of every trust relationship. And that's something really important from Baier's paper. So there are two really important contributions in the paper, but there is more. In fact, there's more than I'll cover here in this video. It's an incredibly rich paper that I absolutely recommend you take a look at for yourself, and I'll link to it down below. Baier goes on to offer a theory of trust and also a moral test for trust. The theory, as stated, comes to this. Trust, pretty much, is reliance on others' competence and willingness to look after, rather than harm, things one cares about, which are entrusted to their care. If we couple that to what we've already seen Baier talking about with the connection to goodwill, we can illustrate this idea as follows. Imagine a parent who hires a babysitter to look after their child for the evening. The parent leaves the house, trusting not only that the babysitter won't harm the child, but also that they are competent. They know how to change a nappy, prepare food safely, and to respond to emergencies. The parent also trusts that the babysitter cares enough to act in the child's best interests while they're gone, not just following instructions mechanically, but exercising judgment and attention. So for instance, maybe the child is nervous about bedtime or has a mild cough. The babysitter's willingness to notice, respond sensitively, and keep the child emotionally and physically safe is what makes the trust meaningful in this particular case. And it looks like this fits Baier's definition perfectly. The parent entrusts something deeply valued, their child, to someone that they believe has both the competence and the goodwill to care for them rather than harm them. It's not just about following a rule book, it's about taking responsibility for another's well-being and doing so with appropriate moral sensitivity. So that's kind of a bit of an overview of Baier's theory of trust. But last, and by no means least, although perhaps less discussed than other parts of the paper, Baier offers a test for when it is morally decent or morally appropriate to trust. Here's what she says. Trust is morally decent only if, in addition to whatever else is entrusted, knowledge of each party's reasons for confident reliance on the other to continue the relationship could in principle also be entrusted, since such mutual knowledge would itself be a good, not a threat to the other. Okay, so again, we can illustrate this idea pretty easily, and that might actually serve to bring out the details of what is quite a complicated claim. So imagine a long-term doctor-patient relationship. The patient trusts the doctor not only with their medical history and treatment, but also with the expectation that the doctor genuinely prioritises their well-being. Now suppose that both the doctor and parent are aware, and not just of what each other is doing, but why they're continuing that relationship. The patient knows the doctor is motivated by professional ethics and care, not profit or indifference. The doctor in turn knows the patient follows advice out of genuine trust, not because they're afraid or they just lack other options. This shared awareness of each other's reasons for trust actually reinforces the moral value of their relationship. In Baier's terms, this mutual knowledge could itself be shared without threatening the relationship. It would actually be a good in itself. If either the doctor or the patient had to hide their real motivations, for instance, if the doctor was only keeping the patient because of a bonus scheme, or if the patient was lying to get medication, then the trust would be fragile or perhaps even in those cases morally dubious. So that's Baier's test for trust. We can contrast that positive case with another case where actually it looks like we might not have morally decent trust. So imagine a senior employee who takes a junior colleague under their wing, offering mentorship, advice and access to professional opportunities. Now on the surface that looks to be a trusting, mutually beneficial relationship. The junior relies on the senior's guidance, and the senior seems to be helping out of goodwill. But suppose instead the senior is actually motivated by self-interest. Perhaps they're using the junior to offload tasks that they don't want to do, or takes credit for their ideas, or just boost their own image as a supportive leader. The junior in this situation, unaware, continues to trust that the senior has the right intentions. Now, according to Baier and the test, this relationship will fail that moral test of trust, because if the true reasons behind each person's behaviour were made mutually explicit, the relationship would collapse. In that situation, the junior could not confidently entrust the relationship if they knew the senior's motives. So here, the knowledge would be a threat, not a good. The trust in that case is only possible because of ignorance, not in fact transparency. So in Baier's view, morally decent trust must withstand mutual disclosure of the motives. Now, Baier's paper is incredibly rich, and I've only started scratching the surface of it here. If you're interested in trust, particularly the philosophy of trust, you should absolutely take a look and see what you think of it for yourself. But that's enough from me for now. Until next time, stay suitably trusting.